welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Karina and I talk about books on this channel. Today I am going to be doing a short story recommendation for the short story readathon that I am hosting next month with Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day and Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes. And I'm just going to talk about some short stories that would give you some ideas for the prompts. Now, you don't have to read any of these stories, or you could read all of these stories. It's just up to you. I just thought I'd give you some recommendations for each prompt. So I have my little cheat sheet I made. We have a bingo card, which I'll be printing off and using, and I will post it up here so you can see what it looks like. But there's 24 prompts. So what I'm going to do is split this video up into two parts. So this will be part 1, and I'll talk about prompts 1 through 12, and then I will do another video. I'll probably do it all in the same sitting, but I won't post it until Thursday, and that will be part 2, prompts 13 through 24. So let's get started. So the first prompt I'm going to talk about is for stories written in the 1800s. Now, for this one, I just wrote down authors for my own reference so that I could pick from their stories, because if they were writing stories in the 1800s, all their stories mostly are going to be in the 1800s, so I can just pick one of their stories. But I'm going to talk a little bit about each author and give you some of their short stories so that you can maybe use them as an author for a story written in the 1800s. Okay, so the first author I'm going to talk about that wrote short stories in the 1800s is Floydor Dostoyevsky. Now, I always mispronounce his name, so sorry if I did. I think I've finally figured out the last name, but probably not the first name. So I first discovered Dostoyevsky back in December. I read a couple of his Christmas short stories. I think it was just one of his Christmas short stories. It's called The Heavenly Christmas Tree, and it is just a very sad story about the human condition and poverty and things like that. I don't want to say too much about the details of short stories because then it kind of gives it away. But yeah, The Heavenly Christmas Tree is definitely very good. It's not something that I would want to read in May, though. I'm very, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm a purist when it comes to Christmas stories. We read those in December, and that's it. But there's quite a few more. He actually wrote 16 short stories, and this collection that I have, this is the best short stories of Fyodor Dostoyevsky. This one has White Nights, The Honest Thief, The Christmas Tree and a Wedding, The Peasant Mary, Notes from the Underground, A Gentle Creature, and The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. So those are all some ideas for written in the 1800s. Another author that wrote some short stories in the 1800s is Oscar Wilde. This collection I bought because it has the Canterville Ghost in it, which was one of my favorite movies growing up, so I'm excited to read the story and see how it compares. But he actually wrote 14 short stories, and this collection has all of them. So it has The Happy Prince, The Nightingale and the Rose, The Selfish Giant, The Devoted Friend, The Remarkable Rocket, The Young King, The Birthday of the Infanta, The Fisherman and His Soul, The Star Child, Lord Arthur Sable's Crime, The Sphinx Without a Secret, The Canterville Ghost, and The Model Millionaire. So yeah, this collection has all of his short stories in it. Another author that I don't have, I have some of his stories that are just part of collections that I have on hand right now. But another author that wrote short stories in the 1800s is Edgar Allan Poe. I'm sure most of you have heard of him. He wrote a lot of like gothic horror type stories. So some of the ones that you could find are like The Raven, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Telltale Heart, The Black Cat. All of those were written in the 1800s by Edgar Allan Poe. There's also a few other authors that I'll mention, but I have them for another prompt, so I'm not going to talk about them right here. But L.M. Montgomery wrote a ton of short stories, and she spanned writing from the 1800s to the 1900s, so you could actually find a story for both of those prompts by L.M. Montgomery if you wanted to. Also, Louisa May Alcott lived in the 1800s. She wrote a few short stories as well. And then Charles Dickens, of course, he has tons of short stories, and he was also an author during the 1800s. Now, there are so many more that you could read from because short stories have always been a big thing. So it's super easy just to go on Google and say short stories written in the 1800s and pull up a ton of different ideas for you. These are just some suggestions that I had. Okay, so the next prompt that I am going to talk about is a short story with a number in the title. And I actually found two in the same book. This is my collection of classic fairy tales from the Brothers Grimm. And I actually thought this prompt would be a lot easier, but digging through all of my short story collections, I just didn't find very many. So I found two in here, and I'm good with that because for the bingo card, you only have to read one. So I'm going to tell you what both of those are, and then if you're interested, maybe you can hunt down a copy of this book or find all these. These are so old that they're in the public domain. So you should be able to find a story somewhere online if you can't find a book of the fairy tales. So the first one is called The Seven Ravens. This story is about a family who has 7 sons, and they end up having a daughter finally, but she ends up being so weak when she's born that they think she's going to die. So the dad tells them to go get some water so that they can baptize her before she dies, and they accidentally drop their pitcher into the well, and because of their delayed return, their dad decides to curse them, and they end up turning into ravens instead of boys. So it's all about that and the girl growing up to save her brothers from the curse that her father put on them. This story sounds fantastic. I love fairy tales, and I really do love the classic fairy tales that haven't been tweaked and made into happy stories by Disney. While I do love Disney stories as well, I do like to read the original fairy tales, and this one sounds interesting. The next one is The 12 Dancing Princesses. This is a story about 12 beautiful princesses that are locked into their bedroom every single night by their father, and somehow they end up escaping their room every night and dancing all night long. And he can't figure out how they're doing it. And the way he knows is because their dancing shoes are worn down, worn out every day. And so he knows that they're doing something. And so he tells his kingdom and his daughters that whoever can figure out the secret within 3 days can marry the daughter or one of the daughters. But if they can't figure it out, then they will be sentenced to death. So that one sounds like a good one. I have seen movies that are adapted versions of this, and it's not their father, it's like an evil queen or something like that. So when I read the synopsis, I was interested to understand why their father locks them up. So I will have fun reading that one just to see what the point is and why he sees fit to lock his daughters in every night. So there's that one. Okay, so the next prompt I'm going to talk about is to read a short story by your favorite author. I'm going to take this off. So I had a hard time with this one because my favorite author is Berta Ruck, and most of her things are not published anymore. I have found 2 of her full-length novels, but I cannot find her short stories. I know she did publish them. It's part of how she became an author, but I can't find them anywhere. So I had to go with other authors that I have read. And so the first one is L.M. Montgomery. I talked about her a little bit earlier on in the video. She wrote tons of short stories, so I might pick one of hers. Louisa May Alcott. Oh my goodness, I can't talk today. Louisa May Alcott is the other one that I talked about earlier, and Charles Dickens. I don't know if there's too much to really talk about on those because I don't know. I'm just going to look up a short story and find one from those 3 authors because those are my favorite authors, but they might not be yours. So I don't see a point in recommending other than giving you the names of the authors, and maybe that will spark some interest in those authors' short stories. So the next one is humor and satire. I checked this wonderful gem out from the library. This is Dragons at Crumbling Castle by Terry Pratchett. These are short stories that this man has written, and it says that there are 14 funny and inventive tales from acclaimed author Sir Terry Pratchett. So it'll be interesting to see what these are all about. Some of the titles are Dragons at Crumbling Castle, Hercules the Tortoise, The Great Speck, Hunt the Snorri, Tales of the Carpet People. That one sounds interesting. Doc the Caveman, The Big Race. So yeah, there's quite a few funny ones in here. And then another short story collection that I found is humorous American short stories. I found this on Scribd, and it has quite a few short stories from a number of authors that are well known in the US, like Mark Twain and yeah, I can't remember any of the other ones. Mark Twain is one of them. And there's actually quite a few stories that I have seen throughout looking for short stories for this readathon in that collection. So it's a good collection to see if you can find on like Hoopla or Kindle or Scribd. Okay, so another prompt that I had a hard time with, and I'm not real sure why. I feel like it should have been easier than it was, but this prompt is fantasy. So I know there's quite a few fantasy short stories, but I was trying to find some that were kind of well known and not like some obscure author that no one's ever heard of. And so the one that I found that interested me the most is The Paper Menagerie. I've actually found this one both on Kindle and Scribd. I wish I had the book itself, but this story is about a little boy who is racially mixed. His father is white and his mother is Chinese. And when he's a little boy, his mother makes him a origami menagerie, which, if you don't know what a menagerie is, it is a zoo. So she makes him lots of different paper animals, and when she breathes on them, they come to life. So has a little bit of magic in it. Sounds like an amazing story, and I've heard that it makes people cry. So I'm hoping that maybe it'll make me cry. Okay, so the next prompt is weather. Now, one of the stories I found is called Snowblind, and this is by Elizabeth Shrout. I tried to find a good synopsis of it, but it was hard to find. So I found a review, and it basically says that the girl in the story, Annie, finds peace and solitude in the woods, but she finds out that her family has a secret, and they begin to tell her not to look at the woods or go into the woods, and it's all about that. So that sounds very interesting. I am not sure much more about it because I couldn't find a good synopsis, but I'm interested to read that one. The next one that I found for the prompt weather is called Weather Watching Hill, and it is in my Penguin book of Japanese short stories. Okay, so the one that I found in this collection is called The Weather Watching Hill, and it is by Seiki Kazumi. I said that wrong. And it is about an earthquake and tsunami that happened in 2011. I would have to do research. I remember a gigantic tsunami, but I can't remember if it's this particular one that it's talking about. But this short story is this author's account of that time. Okay, the next one was the easiest one to find, and it is color in the title. So you will be happy that there are tons and tons of short stories, I didn't even write them all down, that have a color in the title. So let's see. Okay, so the first one I found that has a color in the title is White Nights by Dostoyevsky. This is a story about a man who is very lonely, and he meets a woman and falls in love with her, and they get to know each other over a course of a few different nights, and it ends up that she never does return his love because she misses her lover, and eventually they end up being reunited. So he never does get to be with her. So it's a story of unrequited love. I actually I listened to part of this in December, and I just didn't really like the narrator that was on the story, so I'm looking forward to trying it again and seeing if I like the story as much as I have some of the other ones I've read by him. The next one is Straw into Gold, and this is from my Fairy Tales Respun book. I am assuming that this is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but I can't guarantee that. Let's see. Yes, it is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. So I'm not real sure how that story is going to go. I do know that these are retellings, and I'm excited to see what it is. Another one that I found in this collection is called White in the Moon, The Long Road Lies. Okay, so this story is about a young girl who lives in a small town in southern Georgia, and she is moving somewhere north to become a teacher. And she, part of the story has a going away party for her, and it's just about her coming to grips with the fact that, that feeling when you're in the small town that everything's kind of bland and lame, but then when you leave, you have this longing to go back. So it's kind of one of those stories. Okay, so the next one I found is in this collection of stories that I checked out at the library. It is The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. This is a story about an alcoholic who is driven crazy by his addiction, and he ends up killing his pet cat, and a cat that looks almost exactly like his black cat starts following him and drives him even more crazy. Sounds just like an Edgar Allan Poe story, and I'm excited to read it. The next one is also in this collection, and it is Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway. Okay, so Hills Like White Elephants is about two young people who are sitting in a train station in Spain, and they're having a conversation about how simple the operation will be. So the man is telling the girl that the operation will be simple, and yeah, I think it's implying abortion. I don't know because I have not read it, but I have heard that, and so I'm interested to see where that goes. This was written in the 1920s, so I'm intrigued to find out what their take on abortion was back in those days. Okay, so the last one for this prompt, color in the title, is from the Grimm's fairy tales, and it is called The White Snake. This is a story about a king who receives a platter every night that is covered, and the servant gets curious as to what is underneath the platter, and he discovers a white snake, and then he takes a bite and learns that he can communicate with animals. So sounds like an interesting fairy tale, and really kind of different than some of their other ones. So I'm interested to see how that one goes. Okay, so the next prompt is to read a play. Now, I have a hard time with that. I love watching plays, but a good majority of my literature in high school was reading plays, and it's not my favorite thing to do. But I do have one play that I have been interested in reading for a while, and that is The Importance of Being Earnest. So I am going to read that one. Okay, so in The Importance of Being Earnest, the young main character invents a brother who gets into trouble, and his brother's name is Ernest, his name is John, and it's all about the entangled web that he creates by lying about his brother. Okay, so the next prompt is to read an essay. This one, I think it would be good for you to Google a topic and find an essay that you are interested in. I did find some essay collections on Scribd, and the one that I think I'm going to read, I'm going to read for the Gothic horror, which I haven't gotten to yet. I'm going to read The Yellow Wallpaper. So the essay that I want to read is by the same author, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and it is Why I Wrote The Yellow Wallpaper. It was written several years after she wrote The Yellow Wallpaper, so I think that's the essay that I'm going to read. I also found a little collection of essays by C.S. Lewis that's called C.S. Lewis's Little Book of Wisdom. I found that on Scribd, and I'm sure you can find it in other places as well. It has things like the Christian walk and different things about the Christian walk in it, and it is C.S. Lewis's advice on those topics. So I thought that would be a really good one if you're looking for some Christian essays. Okay, so the next prompt is adapted to screen. So the one that I want to read is The Canterville Ghost. I used to watch this movie over and over and over again, and actually my brother just subscribed to my channel, and he was able to tell me who was in the movie and gave me a link to it, so I'm definitely going to be watching it again. but it was also one of his favorite stories as well, or movies as well. So I'm interested to read the book and see if it is as good as the movie or if I like it better, all of those things. There are so many short stories that are adapted to the screen. I'm going to link Mitzi's video that she just did in the description. She talked about several different short stories that are adapted to screen, not only for movies but also for TV. And she came up with some really great ideas. So I'm going to link that so you can get some more ideas. But here are some of the ones that I found as well. And they kind of overlap with hers. So, but The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, that is our group read. So you can also count that as adapted to screen on your bingo card if you wanted to. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, I've seen the newest movie with Ben Stiller. And in that movie, he basically has this imagination that kind of gets him carried away sometimes. And I think that's the premise of the story. I'm hoping it's the same premise. So I know it's not going to have the same storyline. The story was written in 1939. So obviously it's not going to be the same as the modern take on it. But I'm interested to see how they adapted the story for a modern film. And the next two are by Daphne du Maurier. The Birds, we all have either seen that movie or heard about that movie. And then the other one is Don't Look Now. They're both movies that came out in the 30s and 40s, I believe. And I've heard that Don't Look Now is pretty scary. So I don't know. I might not go for that one, but I do know that her scary is more like a gothic horror type of scary, and I usually can handle that. So I'll have to look into it and see. So for the 1900s, I wrote down some authors that wrote in the 1900s, and maybe you can find one of their stories that you appreciate. But the first one is, the first one is Michael Marpurgo. He is an author that has written quite a few short stories. I have this collection, and then there was another collection that I was considering buying of his that is more on the fantasy side of writing. And I believe he's a British author. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's that one he wrote in like the 1980s, somewhere in there. Then there's Flannery O'Connor. I have heard some amazing things about her short stories. So I'm probably going to be checking out some of hers. Ray Bradbury also is another author that wrote some amazing short stories. He's the author of Fahrenheit 451, and he is an amazing author. So there's that one. And then Ernest Hemingway, I don't know very many people that haven't heard of that name. He has a few short stories that were also written in the 1900s, so you might check his out as well. So the last one for this part of the video is going to be mystery. And I did the same thing that I did with some of these others, and I just wrote down authors. So mystery, I have found a ton of Agatha Christie short stories on Scribd. There's tons of them. I will probably be sticking to Agatha Christie. I do enjoy her short stories. She does a really good job of putting a lot of detail into them and making them just as mysterious as her books. And then the next one is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He obviously wrote Sherlock Holmes, and most of Sherlock Holmes' stories are short stories. So I will be reading some of those as well. So that brings me to the end of part one of these recommendations. I hope that I gave you some good ideas for some short stories to read, and if you liked this video, please like and subscribe. Let me know if you're planning on joining in on the short story readathon. I'm super excited about it. I'm gearing up for it this week. making tons of notes, and I can't wait. My plan is to read a short story every single day, so yeah. But anyway, I will be back soon with more recommendations.